Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to ask, does Salute 52 point the way to the future of wargaming conventions here in the UK? So I wasn't planning on doing another video about Salute 52, so I'd like to apologise in advance. However, with last weekend's show getting over 7,000 people through the door, I wanted to chat about a couple of questions that have run through my mind this week. First, what was it that contributed to the success of the show this year? Was it a general surge in the hobby, the presence of another gaming show event taking place elsewhere within Excel on the same day, or some other factor like, I don't know, good weather or something like that? Secondly, has the show changed over the years, and have those changes contributed to success? And I suppose this leads sort of to a third question. Are there lessons for other shows, and if there are, should they copy them or stick with their own formats in the years ahead? So let's start with maybe the hardest question, because the answers may seem so subjective. Why was this year's Salute so successful, at least in terms of numbers through the door? Now, I've been attending Salute regularly for over 20 years. My first was at Olympia in 2004, and aside from a small number where I've had family clashes and things like that, and I've attended pretty much regularly every year. Now, of course, during that time the venue has changed from Olympia to Excel, but aside from the change of venue and of course the associated costs, the nature of the show has definitely evolved, in my humble opinion. Back in the noughties, Salute was very much, at least it felt like that to me, very much a historical wargaming show. I look back at some of my pictures from that event, and if my album is anything to go by, over 3/4 of the games were historical in nature. This year, by my count, only about a third of the games were historical. Fewer still if you discount alternative history or imagination style games. Now, another change that I've noticed has been the number of games being played on small tables, and by that I mean anything less than a traditional 6x4. There were dozens of small demo games being run by companies on 4x4 or even 2x2 size tables with just a handful of miniatures on display. Now, on the plus side, this does mean that there are many more game systems being demonstrated, and that they're more accessible. Skirmish games are getting a good representation at this particular event. Now, without numbers to hand, I think that reflects a change in the hobby, with many more skirmish sized games and starter sets being available now than when I first got into wargaming. On the negative side, I did feel that many of these smaller games felt a bit lost in such a vast hall, and of course the 2x2 table can only have so many people standing around it at any one time, limited in its potential exposure. However, one trader that I spoke to did say that he felt that one-to-one conversations he'd had during the day were excellent, so maybe this venue worked for them after all. It's really hard to tell. Now, another reason for the success of the show, although maybe not unique to this particular event, is the reputation the South London Warlords have built up over previous years of running this show. Salute is Europe's largest independent one-day wargaming event and has a long-standing reputation for quality. The organisers consistently put on a well-run show with a wide variety of things to see and do. But they haven't sat on their laurels either, and they've been prepared to adapt their offerings to visitors. So in recent years they've included panels in the format, which now appear to be a very popular and well attended addition. There's a history and a tradition to this wargaming show, but they haven't let that tradition weigh them down or hold them back from innovating and adapting to a potentially changing audience. Salute also has a reputation for hosting stunning wargaming tables. Numerous reports over the last week, indeed following every Salute, highlight the incredibly detailed and inspiring displays and participation games put on by clubs, companies and other gaming groups. However, long-term attendees would probably agree with me that there's been a slow shift from really large club organised demo tables to a wider selection of smaller participation games organised by companies eager to show off their rules, terrain or miniatures. In this respect, I think Salute can sometimes feel more like a games expo than a traditional wargaming convention of old. Is that a bad thing? Well, judging from the volume of visitors through the door, maybe not. It definitely feels different to old grognards like me, but it's clearly a winning formula. As previously mentioned, the Warlords are clearly not afraid of innovation, but also respect a good tradition. So the Salute goodie bag has been a staple part of the show for many years. This year, the first 5,000 attendees through the door received an exclusive Salute 52 goodie bag with the usual unique themed miniature in it, dice and a show guide. But this year attendees could also obtain a free STL file for Highlander mech pilot, adding a modern twist to the historical theme. Could that have attracted more people to pay for entry? I'm not sure, but it definitely shows a willingness to move with the times, adapt to new technologies and provide alternatives for hobbyists who no longer exclusively get their miniatures from traditional sources and may increasingly print their own miniatures. Now, while not explicitly stated as the sole reason for the increased attendance, there's an underlying sentiment in some discussions online that the return to large-scale events after the pandemic continues to fuel strong attendance at hobby gatherings. One commenter noted that it felt as good as pre-COVID. Now, I recall going to the 2021 show, which was very sparsely attended with quite a few empty tables from groups that hadn't turned up, and at the time I was wondering if this was potentially the end of Salute. But every year since has been busier and busier. If Salute is anything to go by, the wargaming hobby is in very good health. So in summary, Salute 2025's success appears to be a result of its consistent high quality, diverse and engaging content, exclusive offerings, strong community atmosphere and the continued enthusiasm for in-person events within the wargaming hobby. The online discussion reflects widespread praise for the event's organisation, the stunning displays and the overall experience. But the question that I think is perhaps more interesting is, does this shift, this change in the style of Salute mark a distinct change in how shows should be run, or should more traditional, mostly historical events stick with their formula? Now, my personal opinion is that I like having different shows with different strengths. So, for instance, Partisan seems to be much more historical. It's got very much a distinct tradition, and I enjoy that show for what it is. And I'd hate to see that particular show change. Warfare, another show that I go to on a semi-regular basis, again has its own feel with the tournament scene going on there and a really good display hall. And Salute has adapted to the environment it's in. XL is an extremely expensive place to hold a show, but it's also probably the only venue big enough to hold an event this large, certainly in a one-day event. So, maybe the organisers have had to adapt to the environment that they're in and to the sort of audience that potentially would come to XL to visit a show. It's not quite the same show that it was, say, 10 or 20 years ago. That's understandable. It's still very good. I mean, I'm not detracting at all from the way that the show turned out, because I quite like going to something that's completely different to other wargaming events. When I want to go to an exclusively or almost exclusively historical wargame show, it's going to be the likes of Partisan. If I want to do a load of shopping, it's probably going to be Warfare. But for a good expo of the hobby, looking at a wide range of games across a wide range of genres from lots of different companies and clubs, then I think Salute is the way to go for me. Certainly, I'm not going to complain. I thought it was a very, very good event. My only negatives from the day were very much personal things, nothing really to do with the organisers. There were two things that stood out for me. The first was the parking. Both myself and one of my friends were turned away from the car park because we hadn't pre-booked parking. This has never been the case before, and nowhere on the XL site that I could find did it list this as one of the dates when pre-booking was recommended. I'm going to Comic-Con, for instance, next month, and for that event pre-booking was required, and I've done so. I've booked that. Unfortunately, you can't pre-book on the day, and we were redirected to other off-site car parks about a 15 to 20 minute walk from the centre. Not ideal when you're walking back knackered at the end of the day. But again, nothing to do with the Warlords. This was an XL problem very much. My other gripe is one that I've mentioned time and again: poor signage on display games. At least half of the order tables had no apparent sign saying what the game was or who was running it. Almost all the guilty parties were groups running sci-fi or fantasy games, and most of the historical club games being very well labelled. I'm not sure why this is the case, but maybe I need to dust off my soapbox and have a moan about signage at hobby shows yet again. So just to reiterate, aside from no minor gripes, I did think Salute was an excellent show. I certainly enjoyed myself, despite the pain in my knees and my feet. But that's my own problem. I need to lose some weight, and I'm not getting any younger, and that's it's a downside of such a large show. But I think the positives more than outweighed those small negatives. So time for a very quick hobby update. Obviously I put 3 videos out last weekend, and understandably the channel received a huge boost in new subscribers, hundreds of comments and thousands of views. So thank you to everyone who stopped by and watched my stuff over the last week. It was fun making the videos and even more fun reading all the responses from viewers. So thank you very much. And on the workbench, with Salute out of the way, I've been trying to finish my latest set of models for the Retreat from Moscow project. Monday night, as usual, the rejects gathered online for our usual paint and chat session, and I was able to complete the painting side of my Opportuni here with models ready to ink a few hours later, and indeed I'm starting the basing process now. Now, as well as purchasing some Ulens at Salute, my lovely wife also bought me a couple of units of Cossacks, some mounted and some on foot, which obviously I got the other day on my birthday, and I will be painting those up very shortly. Now these are actually models from Foundry's 7 Years War collection, but to be honest, I'm looking at the models and there's nothing on them that tells you that it's 7 Years War. They're all different. They're not uniformed Cossacks. They're sporting either lances or other weapons that don't look out of place for the Napoleonic period. So very minimal conversion work to make them suitable for as wilder Asiatic Cossacks for my particular project, for this Retreat from Moscow project. So I'm really looking forward to getting and painting those. So that's it for this week. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, if you've got any comments and thoughts about Salute 52, and any ideas as to why the show was so popular, like I say, probably 2,000 people more than usual turned up. If you've got any ideas as to why that might be the case, maybe you know something that I don't. I'd love to hear in the comments below. And of course, if you like the video, please like, subscribe and share. It really does help boost the channel. So until next week, look after yourself, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.